Good morning. It is 9 o'clock, August 16th. We're here for our regular Commissioner Board meeting. We have all three commissioners present in the chamber with our County Administrator and the Clerk of the Board. At this time, if you'd please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, the first item on the agenda is the Commissioner meeting minutes from August 2nd, 2022. Is there any additions, revisions, or corrections? No. Okay. Next, we'll move on to office business, vouchers.
We have one voucher today, fund expenditures. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $1,124,042.82 as presented, to note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the Auditor's Office and the County Administrator.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to the approval of consent agenda. There are 17 items on the consent agenda. A lot regarding the Benton Franklin Workforce Development Board.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 17 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the 17 consent items on the agenda. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All right, next we'll move down to the Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. I was out a couple of days last week, but it's still been a busy time. Continuing to have some conversations with counterparts in Benton County regarding the remodeling of the juvenile justice building. We've seen options and plans from the design engineers, and those will be presented to you at a future meeting, in the not too distant future. Also working with Benton County on the Benton Franklin Mental Health Advisory Committee, some work around the bylaws and the approval of an additional member. Those meetings are continuing and things are starting to move forward with that committee. Participated yesterday with I think most of you in the WASAC update on the opioid litigation. We will be seeing some documents to be signed next week at our Tuesday meeting that the prosecuting attorney's office will be bringing forward to participate in the settlement of that opioid litigation. We held a kickoff meeting for the HAPO project with McKinstry and with the State Department of Enterprise Services, and that work will begin here in the next few weeks. Also spending quite a bit of time on discussions with our folks in OPD. We're going to see some, or I will send you some information from an event that occurred in Oregon. Even though it's Oregon, not Washington, it has application to us in the just the significant pressure that offices of public defense are under throughout the country, but particularly in the Pacific Northwest, to finding qualified attorneys to represent defendants that need attorney representation. It is critical in the state of Oregon. It's fast becoming critical in the state of Washington, but I'll send you that information. We're going to have some discussion at probably next week's meeting with Larry Ziegler from our Office of Public Defense to perhaps kick around some ideas of what we can do to mitigate some of the challenges that we're seeing there. That's really about it for this week, I think. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Peck.
Mr. Johnson mentioned we had the WASAC briefing yesterday on opioids. I think the takeaway from that I'd probably want to share is that a number of counties, but not all, joined the settlement, or joined the lawsuit. And a number of counties who did not join the lawsuit are still eligible to benefit from a settlement that's coming out of it. But if the state does not get, and I forget the number, Keith, what is it? There's some particular number of counties that need to sign on for us to actually achieve a settlement. I guess we'll get that briefing from Jennifer. But point is simply that it's hundreds of millions that'll come into the state that'll be used to fight opioid addiction. The Ben Franklin Council of Governments had our executive session meeting yesterday. This is the time of year in a process where we look at surface transportation improvement projects. This only happens every couple, 2-3 years. This is where federal money flows in and our local jurisdictions meet. They score projects that each of the various jurisdictions has brought forward, and that's always been a professional, cooperative process where everybody scores these projects fairly and honestly according to the merits of the project. But on occasion, sometimes we'll get an outlier where maybe the scores aren't reflective of the project. So that's been a matter of some discussion this week, and we're looking at the process for how we do that. The Benton Franklin Council of Governments has not raised, to my recollection, the member dues, including Franklin County, in probably more than a decade. And we went through the budget yesterday, and it looks like we'll again have another year where it won't be necessary for any change in those contributions from the jurisdictions. I met with a couple of citizens. I bring it up because one was talking about development in the west end of Pasco area and the process for moving packages through city and county government for planning. And we still have some challenges there, but it does sound like things are getting a little better. And met with another individual who is a local attorney who was just sharing some views and some concerns about the availability of attorneys for defense services, which coincidentally came up this morning. So that's it. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
Also attended the Wasac Virtual Assembly. Also met with Jason Zakara on the Board of Health. Still looking for a new health officer to replace Dr. Pearson that's leaving. Also, there was a program this last weekend where they were going to hand out $50 gift cards to get your children vaccinated, and decided that without voting on it, that we would just not take part of that, and so we did not pass out the gift cards for vaccinations. My thoughts are the vaccinations are free. If people want them, we shouldn't be incentivizing them to get their children vaccinated if they're on the fence. I don't think passing out money is a good idea for that, but that's my opinion. Ben Franklin Transit, they're moving towards bringing all the employees back into working on site. Rochelle has implemented a new weekly update that's being sent out to the staff. I think she's doing a great job so far. I'm really impressed. They will be shuttling people to and from the fair all 5 days this next week. And that is my update.
Thank you. I had the Port of Pasco meeting, and they are looking for more ground to purchase to have to develop. So they are on the hunt for more ground out there in the same proximity, I think, of where they're at right now. Ben Franklin Transit meeting, which was a very good meeting. Our new director is doing a great, or our manager, excuse me, not director, but our manager there, the general manager, is doing an excellent job. She made note that we have quite a few vacancies in the upper echelon of Ben Franklin Transit, and at this point in time, they're not going to look to fill them. So they're doing what needs to be done. That thing's top heavy, got a lot of expense in the management office that is really unnecessary. They got a new HR director by the name of Chad Crouch, and he went in negotiations with the shop, had it done in 4 days. had an agreement that the board said was good, so I've reached out to Chad, told him we had a vacancy here. He knows people in HR, so he's gonna give them the information, and if they apply, that'd be great. The only bad thing is they will be coming out of California, he said, but they're looking to exit. But who wouldn't be? Got an email from the Columbia Basin Sustainable Water Coalition Steering Committee they're putting together, and Sarah Higgins, and they're looking for one of us to serve on that. I will volunteer for that if it's with the okay of the other commissioners. Would like to stay engaged with the Columbia Basin and the water issues. Also, the Glade Road, they got the center line painted and the fog lines, and it looks pretty impressive. Looks really nice. And that's the end of my report. So with that, we'll move down to public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Anybody on the phone, Keith?
No one on the phone yet.
George Dockstetter. I want to make a comment about last week when you put the moratorium on for any future growth right now until it goes through the planning commission. I thought about that during the week, and one of the thoughts that came across was why not just rezone or reclassify everything south of Self Landing 1 acre. And the farmers don't want to develop, that's fine, but then you're gonna get out of this 20-acre minimum and having to worry about whether it's farm ground or prime farm ground or subprime, and it can be developed or not developed. If you put a 1 acre minimum on all that property, then maybe that would get rid of FutureWise meddling in our affairs over here and telling us how we're supposed to grow and cracker boxes we're supposed to live in instead of the lifestyle that Franklin County's come to enjoy. One of the reasons I say Self Landing is because we're already 4 years into the 20-year growth management revision we were supposed to have done, where we're gonna have 50,000 more residents in Franklin County. Well, in 16 more years, they're probably gonna up that to another 50,000 or more at the time. The growth rate and the opportunities we have in this part of our state. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Nobody on the phone, Keith?
No.
All right, that'll move us down to the county business vehicle policy.
Yes, this was a process started back when Matt Mahoney was our Public Works Director, so it's been some time since we've been working on this, but it kind of got tabled during some of the transition, and we have completed our staff review and the legal review of the policy and would like to bring it before the board for consideration. You may have questions, or there may be things that we need to clarify to your satisfaction, but essentially the purpose of this is to have a standard policy across all county departments and agencies regarding the policies of use of their county vehicles as well as personal vehicles that are used on county business. So the intent here is to kind of streamline and make sure it's manageable from a risk perspective and from a maintenance perspective as it relates to the ER&R fund. But I don't know that I want to read the entire document to you, but hopefully you've had a chance to see it and certainly would stand for any questions. Jen Johnson, who's the Chief Civil Deputy, did the legal review, is here. She may have some answers to questions too, if you have those, but certainly like to entertain your comments and questions.
Questions?
Has this been presented to all the electeds to take a look at for all their departments to see if it affects them in any way that,
We have
That we
not
might
done
missed.
a formal request for their comments on this after we finished it, but during the process, I think all of them have had an opportunity to weigh in on this.
I think Mr. Mahoney had sent it out to all the electeds. In fact, most of the electeds are using a policy that is very similar. It's one, I don't know which department started it a long time ago and then has been sharing it, because this policy that Matt put together is almost identical to the policy that I've had in the prosecutor's office for years. So it looks like he just updated it, added the ER and R fund information to it, and I updated it to allow employees to come approach the board similar to how our auditor did if they wish to have any accidents covered, stuff like that. So it's just kind of updated to include present practices.
okay. I didn't see anything that stood out that raised any red flags to me, but I would like the other electeds to have the opportunity to voice in on it. I guess it would be my recommendation just to table it till next week.
We can certainly do that.
Does that provide enough time for departments to review it?
I believe it would. Yeah.
So I will join Commissioner Mullen in that request. My premise is just a little different, and I apologize for not having gotten comments back to you on this sooner. A little late in the week when I finally got to it. But just a few examples, and not to pick it apart. I understand that your office reviews things not for necessarily content, but for legal sufficiency. And content is our responsibility. But as I was reading through it, I made a few notes. One was that, it doesn't appear to me that it's particularly clear about when a vehicle use is on or off business, on or off duty. I mean, there are times when it does, but in 3.2 in the fourth bullet, for example, I've got about 7 of these that are content things that I think we need to be responsible for fine tuning. And some of them are just really de minimis sort of administration things. I noticed in the table on page 6 that it's using the old .575 rate for mileage, which on July 1st of this year went up to, I think, .625. So just little cleanup things like that. I don't think there's anything substantial that's going to really push the policy.
Yeah, and we might take out numbers like that since it can fluctuate. I don't want to have to do a new policy every time the feds change their mind on something.
Right, well,
so.
exactly.
We'll
So,
be doing this every week.
so anyway, I'd just like to provide you these comments, which like I say, apologize. I should have gotten them to you several days ago. I just didn't get to it in time. And since we're going to table it for the departments to get a look at it, we can do both.
If you could get me those comments, I can get those into the Word doc and then get it out to the different departments.
Sure, and I'll send it by the end of the meeting.
Thank you.
So Keith, I am in agreement too that maybe next week, and I have a couple questions right now. On the assignment take-home vehicles, under G, it says .65 per mile times 6-month commute mileage. There is that figure in there, but 3.1, county administrator, except where otherwise noted in the document, the county administrator shall have the authority and responsibility for acting on any and all requests for exceptions to this policy. I think the Board of Commissioners should have that responsibility.
That's
So
perfectly acceptable. I have no
something to
problem
look
with
at.
that. It's just for convenience mostly. That
Timely
do you want to be
basis.
bothered with those kind of details? If you do, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Well, now, are these going to be immediate details that have to be?
These, it would be
can be.
rare that we would have an exception to the policy, but it might happen.
Okay.
I think maybe we could write it in for both, because I could see like an exception coming up to where somebody is out in their county vehicle and the school calls and their child is sick and needs to go home now.
Yeah.
Like that type of thing, I think they could get an answer from Mr. Johnson faster than they could, they can't wait for a board meeting for you guys to decide as a board. So one particular person or an appointed person off the board, something like that, I think would work better. I mean, obviously, if it's something that's a month out and they can wait and ask you guys, that would work. So we could possibly write that in, emergencies get approved by X person and non-emergencies need
Yeah.
to be approved by the board, something like that.
This is too vague. That would be more, or in a medical emergency where their spouse was in the hospital with a heart attack or something.
That type of thing is
Yes.
really what we were aiming for.
Gotcha.
But I
That
understand
makes
it probably
sense.
wasn't fully explained.
Okay, all righty. Thank you. And we'll go ahead and table that till next week then. So that moves us down to administration office business. Mr. Johnson.
I do not have anything for board action this morning, other than what we just covered. I do have a request for a closed session and an executive session.
Okay. So that takes us down to public comment. Is there anybody else for public comment? Nobody on the phone?
No.
Okay, if you want to take us into the closed session.
Yeah, maybe we ought to do the executive session first. We're waiting for Lexi Wingfield. She is in the building, but she's on the phone with the Benton County Commissioners in their
Okay.
meeting. So if we
Take
could
us into
maybe
executive session.
reverse those orders, I think that'll help us.
Okay.
I would request an executive session under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph G, evaluate qualifications of applicant for employment or review performance of a public employee, probably for up to, I think we can do this in 20 minutes, and ask that the board, myself, and it should be, just be the board and myself involved in that executive session.
Hey, George.
I would ask that the clerk can be in as well, I'm sorry.
What?
I'll give you a call. We want to get together and meet.
Lexi is available now. She just walked
Oh,
in.
is she?
Yeah.
We're already going into exec though.
If she wouldn't mind just waiting
Okay, I'll let her know.
for a few more minutes, we shouldn't be long on this one.
You ready, Karen? Karen, you ready? We have come out of executive session and we are back into regular session now. Mr. Johnson, if you'll take us into closed session.
Thank you. We're requesting a closed session for up to 30 minutes with, or under RCW 42.30.140, paragraph 4, subparagraph B, collective bargaining. I ask members of the board, the administrator and clerk, and the HR director for Benton County, Ms. Lexi Wingfield, who is here with us, to participate in this discussion.
Okay, we've come out of the closed session, back to regular session. Is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.